Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. Another in my hot takes. This time, the hot take of the Tudor Pelagos FXD. I don't think I can keep my watch YouTube credibility if I don't do a hot take on this watch. As always, this is a hot take, not a critique, not a review. I haven't held this watch in my hand. I've seen the same photos and renders that you have. Take everything I'm going to say with a grain of salt. I certainly will, and I will reserve the right myself to change my mind if and when I ever touch one of these watches. So with all of that said, let's get into it. Okay, so to start with, this is a really interesting release and a pretty interesting watch. So there's a little bit to get through today. The first thing is I'm really glad this exists at all, whether I like it or not, whether it does any good or not. I'm glad that the Tudor Pelagos FXD exists. Why? Because Tudor, like its bigger brother, who you can never really forget, Rolex, is a company which tends to shoot for the middle. It tends to produce crowd-pleasing watches. Rolex and by extension Tudor have a nice collection of iconic looks. And there's a real double-edged sword to that. It's great that you're an icon. It means, however, that you will probably get replicated and your look becomes generic. And that's exactly what's happened to that kind of Rolex / Tudor Oyster Perpetual Black Bay look. It is on one hand iconic, which is great for the brands, but on the other hand, it's been so copied and so massaged and so taken by other people, it's kind of generic. It's dull. You hear people who have bought themselves new Rolexes and new Tudors themselves admit that it's a kind of dull selection. So one of the things I do love about Tudor though is every now and then they branch out. They go in a completely new direction and let themselves fly. Whether that's the P01, whether that's the Black Bay 58925, I think, the silver one, whether it's the Black Bay 58 ceramic with the MEDAS certification and all this other stuff. Those aren't shoot for the middle, make everyone happy kind of watches. Those are aiming for the corners. They're raising the degree of difficulty. They're making things a bit harder for themselves. They might not be liked by as many people, but they're going to be truly loved probably by more. And that's what they've done again with this Tudor FXD. There are parts of this Pelagos Tudor FXD, sorry, other way around. Yeah, the busyness of the bezel, bidirectional, countdown, those fixed bars, all of that's going to mean this is a watch that appeals to less people. But the people that it does appeal to are most likely going to absolutely love it. This will be the watch that they really want. And I think it's fantastic when a brand like Tudor, which doesn't normally do that, as I say, raises the degree of difficulty, shoots for the corner, and goes for some style points. So like I said, I just love that this watch even exists. Okay, the second thing about this watch is the way it plays with the word professional, or the idea of professional. Tudor have made a big song and dance about how they worked with actual French clearance divers in figuring out exactly how might they use a watch like this, what would it need to have. Now, there are some things that it's now got that are different to a normal recreational dive watch. There's some things that it's now got where it's less than it would have been. It's not ISO certified. It was 500 meters water resistance, now it's 200 meters. It had a helium escape valve, now it does not. All of those things are reductions in capability. They have taken away from what you might normally want. The other thing you'll notice is there's things that are just different. Fixed spring bars so that you can't mount a bracelet even if you want to. There's got the as I say, the countdown bezel, different indicators, bidirectional, a whole panoply of things are either changed or are different or are reduced from what you might have got previously with the Tudor Pelagos. And that's common. That's very normal for a true professional piece of kit. I look at this watch and it tells me, like, for example, professionals, don't worry about MEDAS certification because you've got maintenance personnel who will look after your watch for you. You don't care about the durability of a bracelet because in your storeroom, you've got a big bin full of new bands and you just take the one you want, and if yours is getting a bit frayed, you just drag a new one out. You don't need a date because you only use this tool on the day you need it, so why would you need a date to tell you when to use it? This carries hallmarks of a watch which is truly designed for a professional because it doesn't have anything a professional doesn't need, and it's kind of built as though it lives within the kind of military logistics structure I'm used to, where you don't have to worry about all the crap that an enthusiast does. MEDAS certification, who cares? Bracelet, who cares? Date, don't need it. If I'm a true professional, this is a watch which I like. And it kind of, I love the way it plays with the idea that professional doesn't always mean more. It can mean different, and it can even mean less. Okay, so they're kind of the interesting things about the watch and the bigger story about it. What do I think of the watch itself? It's okay. As much as I said before that I think it's a watch that some people are going to love, those people are not me. I find the bezel a little bit busy. I still find the case shape a little bit bland and generic. I actually preferred the older Pelagos dial that had those deep insets, indices. I find this new flat one, I totally get why they're doing it from the whole, pro point of view. They don't want all that fancy stuff on the dial. But for me, it's now, the dial itself is a bit bland, a bit featureless. So yeah, I don't hate the watch, and in person, maybe something will reach out to me. I think it definitely has personality, so it's getting there. But ultimately, the casework looks a bit bland. The bezel looks a bit busy. The dial looks a bit meh. It's not a watch for me. All of that said, I know that this is going to be a watch for someone, and they're going to love it. And I think that's a fantastic thing. So I'm really happy that this watch exists. There is one last thing I'm going to say, which is almost unrelated to this topic about the Tudor release. But what I'm going to say is this. This watch release was really hyped up. People have been waiting for this for months. And frankly, all we were ever going to get was a little spin on a watch that we're well and truly familiar with, which is what we've got. I find it fascinating that in about 4 days, a far bigger company with a bigger history, with a richer history than Tudor, Breitling, has announced it's releasing an entirely new collection. And no one is talking about it. There is no hype. There is no build-up. And that fascinates me. I'm going to do a whole video on that separately. But you know what? I figured I would leverage this video about Tudor to kind of get an ad out there, because I know more people are going to watch this pissy little hot take on a minor update to a watch that we're well and truly familiar with than the release of a whole new collection from a much bigger and more storied brand. So if I can leverage the Tudor hype train to get more interest in a more interesting release, that's what I've just done. Anyway, I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches, and I'll see you later. Bye.